Coming up in this video, I throw a bunch of shit off the roof and I show you how to fix some fascia boards. So let's get into it. G'day everyone, welcome to another video. Today I want to show you how to replace some rotten fascia. Now, luckily there's no gutter on this fascia and we do have some power cables up here, so we're going to have to work around them. I'll explain a few things as we go, but first of all we want to demolish everything. So basically we're to take away all the trim. Usually the fascia holds the eave lining, so the eave lining is what goes underneath here. That was asbestos, so I've had that removed before I started, and we may have to repoint the tile grout here for the roof. So we'll get stuck into it, see what we find, and I'll show you as we go, step by step, what you need to do. As is the case with most rotten timber, it doesn't always look that bad until you start getting into it. But clearly there's no structure left to this fascia, so we're going to cut it off. It has been repaired previously just on the tail. So we're going to take this new repair closer to where the power connects to the fascia. Obviously we don't want to disconnect the power because that's just going to cost more than this whole job. And the timber at that area isn't bad at all. So I'm happy to cut away the rot and repair it close to where the power comes in. Now I know it can be scary doing a demolition, tearing into a house, and you get halfway through it and think, what have I done? How am I going to put this back together? But just trust the process. So to give myself some access with the saw to make a cut, I had to pull some tiles away, and those are just going to fall off anyway, so it was good to move them. And without the roof tiles in the way, I could make a rough cut. Just to get a bulk of the fascia off. And with that out of the way, I can set my saw to a miter. So I'm going to make a square cut, but it's going to be on a bevel. So it's 45 degrees in one direction, but square across the face. So I haven't had to measure any angles here. I just set the saw to 45 degrees, which is just written on the saw. And one pro tip here is to remove bulk of the material. When you're cutting these miters and you've got 3 meters of wood hanging off at the other end, it can make the cut a bit tricky. So if you just cut off majority of the timber and then do that last little section nice, neatly and slowly, you end up with a really good cut on the piece that gets left behind. All right, now that's the demolition done. You notice that black spot there? That's actually water damage, I think, right where a nail was. So a bit of water, a bit of kind of rusty nails. So we've got a bit of a close up here. That's an old nail hole. So it's like water's coming from that nail hole and running downhill. And from about here, you can see these indications of moisture getting in, a little bit of fungus in here, and it gets worse and worse and worse until you get to about here, which is where it had been previously repaired. So that's the cut from where they would have repaired it previously to fix a rotten tail at that end. So we'll sand this up. It's a bit soft, but I don't think it justifies replacing that whole piece of timber. We can just put some wood hardener on that and we should be good to go. Luckily, the rot is only superficial to these structural pieces of hardwood. I'm pretty confident we'll be fine here. The main issue is water getting in, so long as we do this repair correctly, no more water should get in. And as long as things are maintained and painted, there's no reason why things should get any worse. So with the fungus and the rotten timber sanded away, I applied some timber hardener, and now I'm ready to install some new fascia. Another pro tip I quite like, generally speaking, with carpentry is leaving your timber long when you can. I'm a big fan of making cuts in place. So that measurement was just a rough measurement. I only need to make one cut here, which is the opposite miter of the one I cut on the existing fascia. And And as always, when you're working with treated timber, treated pine, anything like that, you want to seal any of your cuts. Now this product here is called EcoSeal. That's a spray-on timber preservative. I've used that before in previous videos, and it is really convenient for jobs like this. You don't have to wait for your traditional paint to dry compared to this stuff. It dries very quickly, sprays on, so there's no brushes, no mess, and there's a bit more to it than just paint. I will talk about this a little bit more at the end of the video, but for now, it's time to get the fascia up. Now, when you're working on your own like I am, it's always helpful to set up blocks, clamps, jigs, anything like that. So with this specific job, I want to make sure my miter is nice and neat. And so that's what I need to be focusing on. I don't want to be holding the other end of this, so that's what that block is there for. It's holding the fascia roughly in position so I can focus on nailing off the miter joint correctly. Here I'm just putting some exterior wood glue in the join. And I want to get a couple of little brads in there, fiddle around with the miter, get that looking as neat as I can. The other advantage of keeping your timber long is that you can hit it and damage it, and it should get cut off later. So this is where I just closed the gap of that miter. I wasn't too happy with it. And now that I had hit it into position a bit better, I could put some extra nails in it and make sure it wouldn't move. And that leads on beautifully into my next tip. I am only using small nails here, just brad nails. They move, they bend, but they also are strong enough to hold things in position. So now I'm happy with where the fascia is sitting. I can take my block off, it's not going to go anywhere, and come back with a drill, because this hardwood is like hitting nails into concrete. And I can nail this thing off properly with some galvanized bullet head hand nails. Now comes the part where I need to finish off the end of this fascia. Obviously I left it long. Now I'm cutting a foot cut here, which is just a level cut. And then I'm cutting a plumb cut, which is just a plumb cut. How about that? Just as the battery on my saw went flat, the battery on the camera went flat. Okay, the battery died on the saw and it also died on the camera, so mention that with a voiceover. Cool story, by guy. Now let's cut some more wood. This is the beginning of all the finishing touches. Now that little triangle you saw was an offcut from the fascia that I just cut. And when you're doing level cuts and plumb cuts, often you'll find that thanks to trigonometry, the angles kind of line up. So I'm going to flip that piece over, and that's going to be that little extra detail that I need to match what's happening on the other side of the gable. The next detail is this piece of scotia, or as my friend Rowan likes to call it, scotia. And what I'm doing is just making a bunch of cuts because I'm too lazy to use an angle finder to find the angle. I'm just trying to take little bits off, doing a back cut there, and trying to get the blade to match up with the existing cut on the old scotia. That's just going to tell me what angle I need to cut my new scotia at. It's back out with a timber preservative and a little bit of glue to put this little triangle detail in. This is just here to look pretty, so it doesn't need a crazy amount of nails. It has got glue in there as well, so a few little brads will do the trick just nicely. And once again, where I can, I've left the timber long. So that's why I only made one cut on this scotia. You can just focus on one end of it. It is lightweight, so there's no jigs here. I can get the angle where I want it, shoot this thing on with the fixing gun. And with that held in place, I can come back with the multi-tool and put a plumb cut on the tail end of this scotia. We're on the home straight now with finishing this job off. We've got some cement eave linings to put in. This is pretty simple. You measure your length, measure your width. Keep in mind you've got a bit of cover when you put your quad on, so nothing has to be too tight here. I'm just using a chalk line and an angle grinder with a diamond blade in it to mark this out and get it cut. Luckily these are small sheets, so I can tuck these into the groove on the back of the fascia. That's going to take care of holding half of the sheet while I get some soft sheet nails in the other side. And a pro tip here is to put your nails in a position where they're going to get covered up by the quad later. And if you're wondering what the quad is, it's this piece of timber here. It's another type of trim. It's a quarter round to match the existing quarter round on the other side. And clever old me remembered the angle from the scotia I cut, which happens to be the exact same angle I need on the quad as well.
This is what's known as scribe cutting or back beveling in the industry. Now, the whole purpose of this is so that the timber matches up with what it's intersecting with nicely, where you see it, and then you remove any material on the backside where you can't see it so it doesn't clash. I like to use a flap disc. It helps me get nice control and remove small amounts of material gradually, as opposed to using a coping saw, which is basically a little hand saw, which can be quite fiddly. With the quad on, that's the end of the carpentry. Now I want to get some paint in there, at least one coat before I put any of the tile pointing in. I also need to do 2 layers of the tile pointing. Now I bought this red tile pointing because it was the closest I could get, and I also bought some black oxide powder so that I could blend that in later on my second coat and match that up with what's existing on the house. All right, I just want to show you this product I was using before while we wait for paint to dry on the fascia. Now this is a timber preservative. This one's made by EcoSeal. You may have seen me use it before in a previous video where I was working on some farm gates. Now, the beauty of this stuff is it dries quick compared to using your traditional sealing type of undercoat and paint that you brush on. You don't have to wait around for it to dry. Throw your timber up. You can get a job like this done in a day. So, awesome stuff, available at a local hardware store, so feel free to check it out. Keep this in mind next time you're doing something like this, where you're cutting treated timber. With the correct colour tile pointing in and another few coats of paint on, this one's all done. So if you have stuck around this far, thanks for hanging around till the end. If you do enjoy this kind of content, there's plenty more on my channel, so feel free to check that out, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching.